We have lots to discuss in today's video, including the latest trade rumors around the NHL gearing up for the offseason. Tonight's trade rumors focus on the Montreal Canadiens, New Jersey Devils, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. We have a suspension for Flames forward Connor Zary. We have a couple of signings involving some prospects today, a few injury updates, and some pretty big news around the NHL schedule possibly changing here for next year or beyond. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in tonight's video. Let's start first with the fairly substantial news we got earlier this evening that Calgary Flames forward Connor Zary has been suspended by the Department of NHL Player Safety for 2 games. Last night, the Flames did battle with division rival Vancouver. Of course, they're in a battle with for the last wildcard spot in the Western Conference. There's a sequence of play that happened when Elias Pettersson, not the star centerman, but the younger defenseman, we'll call him PD 2.0 here, he laid a hit on one of Zary's teammates. A clean hit, nothing wrong with it. It was a big, hard hit, mind you, but Zary didn't seem to like it, and as he came across into the blue line, he kind of I don't know. It looked like he was looking deliberately for some revenge, retaliation, retribution, whatever you want to call it, and went in with the elbow up, forearm check to the head. So it's definitely a case of elbowing for sure. He doesn't have any history. This is not a characteristic play at all for Connor Zary in his young, brief career. He's not noted as a dirty player by any means, but this was a dirty play. One thing about some plays in hockey that if there's anything that I have gripes with, it's players either needing to fight or players seeking retribution for clean plays. In my opinion, like if you see a big hit and you want to get them back for it, well, lay a big hit of your own. It doesn't have to lead to anything that's dirty or to necessarily dropping a glove. Sometimes the fight's justified depending on the hit. A lot of times it isn't. It just depends in my opinion. But for Zary here, like I said, he comes in, elbow up, check to the head. You could tell it seemed intentional after what just happened, which is what player safety reference in their comments here, and he gets a 2-game ban. If he had history and priors, then he would have likely gotten more, but 2 games for him, which will hurt the Flames a bit here. It's a young offensive player that will come out of their lineup for a couple of important games here as they're trying to fight for a playoff spot. A couple of signings here today. We got a couple of prospects, including the Pittsburgh Penguins signing Avery Hayes. He gets a 2-year entry-level contract. Now, Hayes has already been in the Penguins organization, but he was on an AHL-only deal, so he wasn't eligible for NHL action or to be called up. Now he will be. He's put up 35 points in 44 games this year in Wilkes-Barre and having a pretty good season. Avery Hayes had a pretty solid finish to his junior career, had a chance to play in the Memorial Cup, and is a little bit of a late bloomer, if you will, but he's had some nice development time in the AHL, and curious to see how things go for him in the future with Pittsburgh. The Red Wings today also signed defenseman Anton Johansson to a 3-year ELC as well, which is effective next year for the 25-26 season. He is going to report to their AHL club on an AHL amateur tryout for the interim here as well. Now, big injury updates. Chris Tanev was returning tonight for the Toronto Maple Leafs, doing battle with the Florida Panthers. A couple days ago, there was reports saying that he was likely going to miss his 6th straight game, but that's not the case. He was able to come back and play, so that's good news for Toronto, although they've only won 1 game now in their past 5 after dropping the contest tonight to the Panthers. New Jersey Devils defenseman Dougie Hamilton, done for the season, or the regular season for sure, possibly the playoffs as well. GM Tom Fitzgerald, who had made an appearance on a podcast, made that revelation earlier today. Obviously, we know Jack Hughes' season is over after having shoulder surgery, and now another top player in the Devils lineup is done as well. So Hamilton's been out. We didn't really know necessarily what the timelines were, but according to Fitzgerald, Hamilton's regular season is definitely over, and it's possible that he could return in the playoffs if they make a deeper run. So probably making it to at least the second round. He said based on the calendar and kind of plotting everything out, he thinks if the Devils make round 2 of the playoffs, there's a chance. So if they make it to round 3, well, better chance. But that's still not going to be easy, and that's still substantial time. The way the Devils are hurting with their injuries and whatnot, making a first-round victory over likely Carolina's, who they're most likely matching up with, is going to be very challenging. So we'll see what happens, but that's bad news for New Jersey. After already losing Hughes, now Hamilton done as well. And of course, Hamilton's had a couple of serious season-ending injuries here recently, so definitely not good. And we're going to talk about the Devils' blue line here coming up as well, because there is some speculation going forward into next year and beyond that they might have to move on from some of their young prospects that look pretty good just because of lack of opportunity here. Now, we also got some updates today on the schedule. It's come from TSN Insider Trading and Pierre LeBrun. The upcoming 25-26 season, likely not going to see anything too substantial. However, 26-27 is a possibility that we could see some changes. For example, it's possible that the season might start a little bit earlier. Normally, it starts around October 8th to the 10th, like around that range. There's speculation it could either go back around to October 1st or maybe even into the last couple of days of September. So having it start sooner so that the schedule is not so compressed and they have maybe a little bit less back-to-backs, a few more extra days off. Just add some more days to the schedule here to make it a little bit more doable. Now, there's also some speculation that by the time we get through next year and into 26-27, which we should have a new CBA intact before then, that the schedule might also go to 84 games. And if we add 2 more games, you definitely need to add more time. It's also some talk and part of the CBA that they want to shorten the preseason as well. So training camps and the preseason games will be reduced. So overall, the whole calendar, counting all that, won't be drastically different. It's only going to be altered slightly, but part of it will be condensed and reduced, and then part of it will be extended. But it should work out to give players a little bit more breathing room and just have a little bit more flexibility to have more days on the calendar so that they're not playing so many games in such a short period of time. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. There's still expected to be an all-star game leading into the Olympics next year as well. So I know some people were kind of hoping maybe we wouldn't see that, but the last we had heard from the NHL on that front, according to Pierre LeBrun, things haven't changed. That have some sort of all-star showcase as like a send-off for the guys going to the Olympic Games. Now, we did get another tidbit of information from the NHL trade deadline on something that never happened, but one of the names that was a top, talked about tradable player that was getting a lot of attention from other teams was Rakell from Pittsburgh. A couple of reasons. One, he's a great forward on a great contract, having a great productive year. The Penguins are far out of the playoffs. We know they are, definitely looking to retool and continue. They're not going to go through full-on rebuild, but they definitely want to make the team better, younger, faster, whatnot. So there was some talk that Rakell, even though he's not a pending UFA, might still get moved. He has an extra year in his contract, but still lots of teams were very interested because of, like I said, the low salary and the fact of the positioning of the Penguins in the standings. But apparently the asking price, according to NHL executives that are talking now after the fact, says that they were looking for 2 first-round picks and a top prospect. Now, they're also saying the Penguins never really expected to get that. They set the asking price so high that that's the only way they were going to move them. If some team was willing to come in with a ridiculous overpayment where they could really, grab some major assets like, 2 first-rounders and an A-rated prospect. And teams, as much as they like Rakell, were not going to go that crazy with it, right? So essentially, they didn't want to move him. But if a team wanted to be crazy and offer something like that, they would have, and that's the only circumstance that they would have done it. So we really didn't know a lot about the asking price for Rakell. Considering his salary and his production, I'm not shocked that it was a big price tag. I'm a little surprised it was that big. We've also heard, like I said, about Brian Rust maybe getting some trade attention in the offseason as well. But the other name that we're really going to focus on today that likely does get moved, that the Penguins are more motivated to move, is Erik Karlsson. Karlsson certainly, he's a good defenseman, has his defensive shortcomings, to some degree always has, but he's had his, in his prime, I think he was able to overcome those more with, more speed bursts and just just stronger play overall. He is a bit older. He's, maybe not quite, he's not prime Erik Karlsson anymore, but he's still really good. And he's still, a very solid puck mover and very, very strong offensively gifted defenseman. And in the right role, could probably thrive. I think, especially if he's given a smaller role, could really benefit a lot of teams. But the problem is he makes too much money. Now, according to reports, there's belief that the Penguins would need to eat some money to move Karlsson, which is not a big surprise. Josh Shea of The Athletic, who covers the Penguins as a beat writer, has said in his article says that league executives have told him, based on what they've heard and talked to the Penguins about, they feel that the Penguins would probably have to eat around $3 million to make that trade happen. If they're willing to do that, they can find a way to move Karlsson. So essentially, he'd become a $7 million defenseman. You factor in how much the cap is going to be rising over the next 1 to 2 years, that's, a lot more manageable. But even then, at $7 million, you would expect him to still play a top 4 role. You don't really want a $7 million third pair guy. So, I don't know. I know there's been lots of talk about where he could go. Every once in a while, it pops up saying a reunion with the Senators. I just don't think there's any way they can even do that. To be honest, they've made so many improvements themselves that it doesn't make sense at this point. When his contract is up, if he wants to come back to Ottawa at that point and sign a cheaper veteran deal to kind of have a little nostalgia run and maybe try to win a cup or something, then that maybe that happens. But until then, I just don't see any way they could do it. But there are teams out there who could, maybe look to a team like Vegas, for example, or, there's other teams as well. I know even there was some mention of maybe Detroit being one of those teams. Hard to say. But at the end of the day, Karlsson is a player that the Penguins are motivated to move and will be pushing hard to find a trade partner as they get into the offseason. Like I said before, for some of you asking why we're still talking about trade rumors, the NHL regular season only has just over a month left in it. And for half the league, their offseason will be starting. That's only like 4 weeks away. And some of these teams are going to be looking to make some big moves. And we're going to be starting to hear a lot more about their plans. And that's not that into the far distance here into the future. Now, as I mentioned, we got some stuff I want to talk about Montreal and New Jersey. New Jersey Hockey Now has a recent article talking about the possibility about, are the Devils going to be in a situation where they kind of have to trade either one or both of Nemec or Seamus Casey. They have 2 really good prospect defensemen here, and there's just no room for them. I mean, it makes you wonder how much confidence Tom Fitzgerald and the Devils have in these 2 prize prospects, given what they've done with their blue line through free agency and trades over the past year. Obviously last year, in the offseason, they picked up Jonathan Kovacevic from Montreal. They really like him, and they just obviously gone through a contract extension discussion here. So, with Kovacevic, being in the mix now, you've got Dougie Hamilton, you've got Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon, Luke Hughes, Siegenthaler. There's just no room for these guys. Now, right now, they're getting, there's more of a chance because Hamilton's out for the season. Siegenthaler's hurt as well. So, with injuries, there's opportunities to play. But if everybody's healthy, they're kind of boxed out. So, the question is do you try to get, some other assets for your team that makes other parts of your team better? Because these guys would have high value. Nemec was a number 2 overall pick. Casey wasn't quite as high, but he's still a very valuable prospect. Could they add, a bigger piece to the goaltending situation or the forward situation? Goaltending for the most part is kind of intact here with Markstrom on a longer-term deal. I don't think, based on what I've heard, that I don't think Jake Allen will return to the Devils next year. I think they'll likely go with Dawes possibly as a backup, or they'll find a cheaper option through free agency. But I think they'll want to, obviously, they brought in Markstrom and Allen to give the younger guys a chance to go down and develop. I think ideally Dawes is probably the guy that they'd like to see grab that spot next year. But I'm not sure how they feel about all that right now. But I just know based on what I've heard that there's a good chance Allen doesn't return. So they will be looking to change up the goaltending a little bit next year with Markstrom still being the starter. But the forward group's probably where most of the, any impact players are going to be looking to do. So, clearly this is a good Devils team. But, you take some injuries that they're facing with now and suddenly it's going to be tough for them to make any hay in the playoffs. So hard to say what they do, but on that blue line, is it more likely that they're going to move a veteran out? Are they going to get frustrated with Dougie Hamilton's health? Maybe try to move Dougie Hamilton? I mean, they just signed Pesce. They just signed Dylan. You're not moving Luke Hughes. Siegenthaler's a pretty good value. You just brought in Kovacevic over the past year. Want to extend him. There's not a lot of options. If they're going to move a veteran guy, I think the only one you consider is Hamilton. And I'm not quite sure exactly how they'd feel about that. So some interesting times with that Devils blue line. But these guys are going to be looking for playing time, if they already are, to some degree here. Obviously getting a little bit because of injuries. But, long term, they're going to have some tough choices to make. And they either move a veteran or these guys are going to be asking to be moved on so they can get a chance to play somewhere else. And lastly, I want to touch on the Montreal Canadiens. Now, former NHLer Georges Laraque, of course, was in Montreal media. He was talking on the radio, talking about Joshua Waugh, and that he doesn't think that Joshua Waugh has a future with the Habs. He doesn't think, and of course he was recently called up, had a chance to play some games, hasn't been too bad, but doesn't think that Waugh really has a future in Montreal, and that by next year, sometime during this offseason, that the Habs are going to use him as a trade chip and likely move on. I mean, he was a 5th-round pick, but then after his draft, he really exploded with the scoring in junior, had some good AHL time, and then last year had more of a chance to get some NHL time, but couldn't quite stick. This year he was cut in training camp, and Laraque feels that was kind of a sign that they just don't see a spot for him on a full-time basis. So Joshua Waugh could be a pretty interesting prospect that could generate a good return, as we talked about before in recent days here. But what else Montreal might do this offseason? There's no doubt, I think, that they're going to be looking for another top 6 center. I think you've got a good first line. Slafkovsky hasn't always played there, but for the most part, when he has, he's been better. I'd leave Slafkovsky with Caulfield and Suzuki. You've got one really good line there. For a second line, Demidov is coming next year. You need another centerman to play with him. Alex Newhook is not him. Kirby Dach, I don't think is him either. Now, can Dach be traded? I think they're probably having regrets on that acquisition. Hasn't worked out, hasn't been able to stay healthy. But because of that health stuff, I'm not sure they can move Dach this summer. But, either way, I'm not convinced he's the right centerman either for Demidov. If Dach is going to play with the Habs next year, I think he needs to play on the wing. They re-signed Jake Evans, so he's going to be one of your bottom 6 centermen. With the money they're giving him, he can likely be on your third line. There's going to be a few changes, obviously, within the lineup there, but could a player like Waugh be part of a package to bring in a top 6 centerman? They have a number of defensemen still that are working their way up, some prospect D that are very interesting, and they have lots of draft capital. So not quite sure, not quite clear exactly who the Habs target, but do you agree with the analysis here of Laraque that Waugh very well won't likely find a full-time regular spot with the Canadiens and is likely going to be one of the pieces they use this offseason as a trade piece to find that other centerman? Like I said, we've seen numerous reports and belief out there from NHL reporters that they think Montreal is going to be a team to watch at the draft again to see if Ken Hughes can pull off another Ken Hughes magical moment here where he pulls off a major trade and brings in a big piece. Even yesterday, talked about the fact about Laine. I know after I put that video out, he scored a power play goal in the Seattle game last night. But there's some that think that the Laine experiment should come to an end as well, right? So you've got Laine. I don't know for sure that he sticks around, to be honest. So with Laine, again, another player that I do wonder what the future holds for him. Does he get moved again? Does he stick around? There's, obviously had a hot start, but then there's been kind of up and down since. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly where things fit there. But between, guys like Waugh, guys like Laine, they said they have lots of prospect D that they're not all going to be able to be Montreal Canadiens long term. So they could certainly make a good pitch for a centerman. There's no doubt. It's just not quite clear exactly who they're planning to target just yet. But with Demidov coming in, you definitely want to start him in a top 6 role with a new centerman. And I just don't think that centerman is in Montreal as of yet. So be curious to see how they proceed there. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.